In this session, we are going to discuss about cultivation analysis theory. Let's get started. So, cultivation analysis theory was developed by George Gaubner and Larry Gross, the two professors of communication from the University of Pennsylvania, who proposed this theory in the 1970s. What this theory offers is largely a study that examines long-term effects of television on human behavior. It is one of the core theories of media effects. It's an effects theory. According to the theory, people who watch television frequently are more likely to be influenced by the messages from the world of television. So the world of television offers different kind of messages, okay, in terms of contents. Those people who spend more time or who consume more content from television are likely to be more influenced, and there could be changes in their behavioral pattern or how they act or react to certain situations in everyday life. This is what the theory offers. The influence goes on to say such an extent that their worldview and perception starts reflecting what they repeatedly see and hear on television. So television's content works as a subconscious propaganda to, alter or change perception or worldview of the consumers, and they start behaving in the same way. Television is therefore considered to contribute independently to the way people perceive social reality. So the very existence of social reality is perception based, and television plays a very significant role in contributing to the thought process of how people understand and perceive the social reality. What is the hypothesis of this theory? The theory postulates that watching television frequently influences an individual to develop certain ideas of reality or beliefs and assumptions about life that mirror the consistent or universal values that are showcased on television. So every kind of content that is offered on the television has some sort of, you know, um, a value system associated with it. And whatever content is, reflected, or whatever content is offered by um, the television has some sort of a very significant influence on individuals, and they start developing their reality around, or their belief systems or their assumptions around the world based on the kind of value systems that is showcased on television. So the more a person watches television, the more likely he or she is to be influenced by what he or she watches when compared to others who watch less but shares other similar demographic characters. Okay, you could have different kind of people coming in and around you. It could be your families, your friends belonging to different background, but the parameter that is used in order to look at on the influential nature of individuals as well as group of people would be based on their the time that they spend watching different kind of television content, and that has a significant influence or impact on how they see the world, or what kind of you know understanding they would have about the world. Theory also argues that media generally presents an image of the world that doesn't reflect reality, and which is something that is not extremely new for us, whether it is television or cinema. It creates a hyper-realistic sort of, you know, an understanding of things which could be fantastical in nature, which could not be real. But the thing is, we get influenced as media consumers. We tend to get influenced by the image that is projected as you know reality, which is not reality. Television images are an exaggeration or fantasy of what actually exists. Okay, you can take up soap operas, for example. The kind of costumes or the kind of everyday life that is shown on soap operas are far removed from reality. Okay, this is not how things happen in our lives. Most of the times, we get to see a glimpse of what that world looks like, but that world is largely fantastical. That's why attractive. We tend to believe that that world is real, and there is a disproportionate number of handsome gentlemen, beautiful women, crime, wealth, violence, something that might or might not happen in real life, but in most cases it doesn't happen. Everybody doesn't have chiseled bodies. Everybody doesn't have this extremely attractive body image. and something that creates an aspirational, framework, and it has a problem there. So as a result, people end up perceiving the real world in a distorted manner and viewing actuality through the television perspective. So everything that is real, is kept aside, and everything that is offered from a perspective of television is considered to be, uh, you know, um, an actual way of living. And people start viewing the real world in a very distorted, myopic sort of a manner. Television offers a plethora of ideas and conceptions on a variety of social and cultural dynamics like race, gender, sexuality. Over a period of time, a fixed image of various group of people is formed, and viewers start to absorb those ideas, which they then use as a map to navigate through life. So we tend to look at, like, in the other class I was telling how cinema has built stereotypes, or how television, fictional content has built stereotypes around certain kind of characters, around certain race. So we look at a South Indian person and perceive him or her as a Madrasi who now is black in color, or who has a heavy accent, or those kind of things, or how gender roles are extremely divided, that the boys are supposed to go out and play and the girls are supposed to stay indoors and help in household chores, and or as somebody who is asserting his or her sexual rights, um, are perceived to be people with um, you know weird mindsets, or people who whom the patriarchal world cannot accept, or people who believe in an alternative sexuality or practice alternative sexuality are always perceived to be people who must live in the fringes, and they are not socially acceptable. So these sort of notions around race or gender or sexuality or people or communities are extremely problematic, and the viewers or the consumers who tend to consume television content more and more, or cinematic content more and more, which is fantastical in nature, which is extremely fictional in nature, tend to absorb those sort of ideas that are presented by television, and they tend to navigate through their life using those sort of signs and symbols, or the kind of framework that the television offers. This constant exposure to the media content cultivates specific values. Okay, these values which are deep ingrained within our so-called culture and tradition that is projected on cinema or television content, beliefs, attitudes, and desires in people. These newly preconceived notions shape their perception of the world, and they ultimately influence how others perceive them. So you not only just get influenced, you tend to influence others, and that's how uh, you know consumerism, extreme consumerism, and capitalism has grown into the market. That we tend to believe that whatever we have is not enough, and we need to have more and more. Um, and our social status is reflective of what kind of clothes we wear, who we hang out with. If you're not going to Starbucks, then you are not a cool person, or if you have not watched Game of Thrones, then you are not considered into the system or structure. So people therefore end up unconsciously shaping their thought processes and behavior based on what they consume. So this is something that works at a subconscious level. That the way you act and react, or your basic behavioral pattern, undergoes some sort of changes, and your daily processes of how you look at life, or your thought projections, are all shaped by the kind of content that you consume. In today's world, people are increasingly starting to depend on television more and more than any other medium to understand the intricate way of the norms, values, and mindsets of the society in which they live in. And this is problematic because television tend to create that sort of a consumeristic, propagandistic uh, framework for the youth, or for those people who are slowly shaping up their understanding of the world, and they tend to look for uh, they tend to look for the right sort of a framework, or right set of a structure or belief, or how their attitude should be, or their belief system should be, from television or from the kind of content. So what would happen is, unless it's critical of the society, unless it's critiquing the problematic situations, or the problematic scenarios, and gives you actually an ideal picture. Sometimes the ideal also becomes subjective, because we tend to believe or not believe in certain kind of frameworks that's there, and it's the perceived reality that helps us navigate through. And we tend to not just get influenced, but we also tend to accept that as our reality and try to propagate it. And this is where the problem is. Then cultivation theory research views television as a system of messages and tries to understand its function and consequences on the audience. Okay, so what sort of research was done around it was how it cultivates mindsets, or how it cultivates attitudes or belief systems or structures around the kind of messaging that is done on television, and how that has a larger impact or a functional consequence on the audience. These messages complement one another and are organic and coherent in nature. You can see a pattern or a structure that those sort of messaging offers on television. So cultivation analysis focuses on the impact of long-term cumulative exposure on television. So over a period of time, the kind of accumulation that happens, how you are exposing yourself to television content, what kind of genres you get gravitated towards to, or what attracts you on television, would also define how you see the world, or how you want to see the world, or what are your desires, or what are your thoughts, so on and so forth. How do we apply this theory? Um, Various studies have supported the claim that those who watch television more frequently often display higher tendencies of being depressed and lonely. There is a sense of alienation that grasps them, having feelings of mistrust, and think that the world is a malicious place. Why does this happen? You have to understand this from a psychological phenomenon. Um, that your exposure to those kind of content which is far removed from reality are going to pronounce um, images and frameworks which are fantastical in nature. So you are constantly living in an altered reality sort of a universe, and your existential realities or your everyday life is way away, from the kind of content that you consume. So it is very natural that as a television consumer, or as a content consumer on, you know audiovisual media, you are likely to stay depressed because you see nice, happy, beautiful, attractive, desirable things all the time. And because you might want to be there because it is aspirational in nature, but is your reality is far different from that. That would help, that would force you to, you know operate in a very lonely sort of a space, and you constantly get subconsciously alienated from that sort of matter which is aspirational but yet alienated, and you would have feelings of mistrust, and you would think that the world is actually not a better place to live. A study conducted in an experimental setting saw the outcome, and at the end of the test period, that students who watch more action adventure programs during a 6-month period are likely to believe that the world was a very dangerous place. They also believe that there is a high chance of that they would be personally involved in a violent incident. This is in stark contrast compared to the attitudes of other students who did not watch as many action and adventure shows as the test group. So it's something that is scientific in nature. There is a neurological impact of the kind of content that you consume, and your mind is constantly engaging or acting upon those sort of things. So when you apply those sort of theories or principles that are offered by these two gentlemen, you would know that subconsciously the attitudes or the thought processes are changing, or are in some way getting impacted or getting influenced by the kind of content that you are consuming. One research by Ilje has shown the people who watch television frequently are more likely to answer questions faster as well, because you are also gathering a lot of information. Now that information might or might not be relevant, but you are just subconsciously consuming them. They also give answers that reflect the messages or images that are most common or repeated on television. Television does that from time to time. If you look at the current state of Indian television media, why they are constantly engaging in the kind of messaging that they are doing, barring handful of journalists who still want to be in that ethical space and do ethical journalism. Rest of the media houses or news channels, or individual journalists who have reached a certain stage, who have a certain kind of followers, they are likely to, or they do on an everyday basis, engage in doing right-wing propaganda. They engage in creating bigotry or those sort of messages, which is divisive in nature. They constantly do that. whether it is the Jamia incident, how it was reported, or how the Republic or the Asta could go on to um, offer their insights, so-called journalistic insights into the CA-NRC, and why more number of people should believe that CA-NRC is a right move by the right wing, or whether it is their, reportage on Article 370, so on and so forth. So these sort of things are constantly repeated. Why that story of Sushant Singh Rajput, who died of suicide, was given this sort of an angle where there is nexus between Bollywood and drug mafia, and why so many names were taken up. People were questioned why was a person like Deepika Padukone was dragged into this sort of a case. Clearly, it has got some sort of a linkage with her genuine presence when she just went in solidarity as far as the protest was concerned. So understand how these things shape up and why television constantly offers these kind of things. Why so much of advertisements are bombarded onto people, because they know that it's a consumeristic world and people tend to like nice and interesting things. So the more desirable content you can create, the more uh, uh, the better way the capitalistic market can proliferate. Cultivation analysis theory has been widely used in the study of violence in television. Okay, it's something that studies violence in a deeper way. The theory has been used to explain how children who watch violent cartoons become violent themselves, and something that has happened to us the other day. I was giving an example of how, while growing up and watching WWF, had a severe impact on us, and we would constantly fight amongst ourselves and try to replicate those moves. And it is problem. It's a huge problem that we tend to develop violent streaks within ourselves. And at that point in time, repeated exposure to violence on television might just reinforce existing beliefs that the world is a dangerous and unsafe place. And you have to be this heroic, machoic figure who would fight all the bad people on the world. The exposure to television further strengthens the position that acts of violence are a natural response to a situation of conflict. So in any kind of a conflict, you need to act heroic instead of acting intelligent. You try to be at loggerheads with the situation. And those streaks of violence are problematic in nature. And your exposure to television, where you constantly are exposed to heroic figures, figures who take on and position themselves in the space of righteousness, and they would fight and win. This sort of a understanding is largely problematic. Over the years, research in the field has diversified, and today cultivation theories are applied to the studies on health, religion, gender roles, sex roles, political orientation, etc. So it is no more just restricted to the study of violence on television anymore. Now it's um, the, the points or the critical features of this theory could be applied to studies on health or areas on religion, sex roles, political orientation, so on and so forth. The delta between those considered to be light viewers and heavy viewers is called cultivation differential. How do we look at cultivation differential? How people consume, what kind of content people consume, and what sort of nature they develop or cultivate. So those people who are on the lighter part of consumption and on the heavier part of consumptions, the gap between them could be defined as cultivation differential. This describes the extent to which an attitude on a particular topic is shaped by the exposure of television. So those people who watch G News and Republic on a serious note are likely to believe that the right-wing dispensation is actually doing an incredible work in shaping this country and making India great. Whereas those people who consume those kind of content less, or take that lightly, or watch that content for largely for comic purposes or um, critiquing point of view, they are likely to develop an alternative attitude where they will critique the policies or the moves of the central dispensation. So that's more or less about cultivation theory, what I wanted to share or talk about. Thank you, and I will stop here.